I'm James Pastor. Thanks for coming. I'm the program director here at Clay Art Center. If you're not familiar, Clay Art Center is a ceramic organization, nonprofit, located in Portchester, New York. So we are in Westchester, New York area, which is sort of northern suburb of New York City. Very beautiful area. Here you're looking at our building and our mission. Our mission is believing strongly that arts have the ability to touch and enrich lives. Of course, we focus on ceramic education as far as our art form, and we really believe in accessibility and spreading ceramic education the best we can. And a part of that are these free webinar programs. So we're happy that you guys can come here and join us. If you were able to donate, that's very much appreciated as well to help us keep sustaining our mission. We are a multifaceted ceramic organization. We have a robust residency program, artist program, youth and adult workshops, classes, exhibition, and shop space as well, along with an incredible community arts program, which Vicky Youngman teaches for us as well. She's one of our community arts teachers, which is really wonderful. While I'm introducing Vicky, Vicky is based out of Westchester, New York herself. Vicky is an adjunct professor of ceramics at Pace University. Like I said, Vicky teaches for our community arts programs here for Clay Art Center, as well as ArtWestchester, a different nonprofit organization in the area, among many other places. So we're in good hands today. And thank you so much, Vicky, for being with us. It's a real pleasure. And I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, James. I really appreciate you and Clay Art Center having me here today. And I'm very, very excited to be here. I just wish that I could see you all and participate, have this be more of an exchange. So what I'll ask you to do is make comments and ask questions as we go through the whole slideshow. I would really like to hear from you. I think that would help me. I don't particularly want to lecture for 40 minutes, so I would rather it be a back and forth. So you have, I don't know if James, you want to tell people.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Thank you, Vicky. So folks, any questions at any time, please feel free to hit the raised hand button feature on the bottom of your screen. You should see a button that says raise hand. A lot of you are probably familiar with this already. So if you have a question at any time, feel free to hit that button, or you can even type in your question under the chat feature as well at any time, and we'll sort of have this be informal and a sort of conversation with Vicky. So at any time, yep.
Great, great. And I want to thank my cousin for being here. She's from Texas, and I think she brought her art group, so that's really cool. And all my other friends as well, all my pottery friends. Okay, so here we go. So this is all about my process and design and how I come up with ideas for ceramics and inspiration, but also, you know, for you to think about how you do it. So let me just back up a tiny bit and say that this is my second career. My first career is as an art therapist. I was a practicing art therapist for 23 years at places like Bellevue Hospital in New York City and other places. And as part of being an art therapist, I needed to branch out and not just do painting or drawing, but clay as well. So that's when I really got started, really turned on to clay. And I, like many potters, I was really attracted to the color, the surface design, the forms, the fact that it was just endless, like endless possibilities. I just love that. And it also spoke to my pragmatic side, which was you could make a beautiful cup, mug, plate, bowl, and give them as gifts or sell them. People can use them every day, as potters know. But that was another thing that I really drew me to ceramics. So in a few minutes, we're going to be talking about orchids. I'm going to focus on that. But my process has just been one avenue after another. I've never picked a lane, as they say. I like to follow all different kinds of processes in ceramics. So One thing that we know that happens in ceramics, those of us that are potters, let's see if I can advance the slide. Just a second here. Oh, okay. Hold on one second. Okay, I need to go back to something. Here we go. Okay. All right, now we're good. Okay, so that's what happens in ceramics too, something unexpected. So we know that things crack, break, warp, the glaze doesn't turn out the way you want it to. All of that happens in ceramics as well as all the fun stuff. So you just kind of got to go with it. So I was really inspired by one of the other artists that was on in the past couple of weeks. Her name's Lauren Scully Bailey. And she talked about this a little bit too. And she saves a lot of her work, the broken work, and reuses it, which is something that I've done forever. So I have all kinds of broken pieces and scraps in my basement that I can't get rid of. So this is one of them here. I think you can see a plate. And that I made a long time ago, and that actually has an orchid carved into it. Obviously, I could never use it, but I couldn't throw it away either. So I still have it. It's waiting to be repurposed. The other slide is a lot of bits and pieces that I make as I go along. Potters will know that when you throw a pot on the wheel and you use a bat, you take the pot off and there is that little circle of clay. So I scrape those off and form them into these little bits and pieces. We have one here, and save them and bisque fire them and use them for wall pieces eventually when I get around to it. So the one on the right, you can see here, is a whole bunch of those little pieces that I glazed individually. And I like to do that because you can easily glaze an individual piece, stack them all together, and then fire them and they'll fuse. So that's what I'm going to do on this one here on the left when I have time, is build another one of these wall pieces. And that is actually sitting in a plate I made that I did not like. So I'm reusing all of this. So here's some that I experimented with. The one on the left cracked. It was a piece that cracked, so I was able to salvage it. That's called cope. The one on the right, I forgot the name, but the people that bought it told me they call it the mailbox, which I think is pretty funny. So it has a whole different life now. But anyway, a lot of those little pieces I was telling you about, I used in this one. Now, maybe potters know what all of this is from. This is also scrap that when you trim a pot on the wheel, you get rings, little rings of clay. At least when I do, I try to get at least one little ring here that I can take off and save and bisque fire. So I have those, and I don't know what I'm going to do with all of them yet, but I have used some of them, and I'll show you that in a second. This pot here on the right is a pretty big, heavy bowl, and the bottom blew out. So again, you kind of got to go with the flow. I haven't been able to throw it away. Maybe I'll build a big sculpture out of it at some point. I don't know. But here is more of these where things have broken and I've built some wall piece from it. So those circles from the trimming, I was able to use one that was fairly sturdy here in this piece. This is called Wedding Constellation. This, I think, was the broken piece here. This half. These are other little squishy pieces I was telling you about. And there's one that's a little bit bigger, more like a ribbon. And the artist Lauren that I was telling you about, she makes a lot of those ribbons on purpose. So I really resonated with a lot of what she has to say, because I've just found myself doing some of that on my own. These flowers, I tend to make a whole bunch of them at one time. Not at one time, but as I'm hand building something, you'll have a little thin scrap piece of clay. I'll pinch those ends, roll it up, and make these flowers and bisque fire them and then use them in some kind of sculpture. So here's another one. This is called Breaking Free. And both of those broke at the neck, I think, and I didn't want to throw them away. So again, repurposed them. So here's a lot of the flowers. This is a rather, not a rather big piece, not huge, but it is kind of heavy. But it's been hanging on my wall for a while. So these are a lot of those little kind of scrap pieces I was telling you about that I make as I go along and then save them for when I want to use them later, and the flowers. And then this is more of a collage of pieces I made at different times in all different ways. So here's one of the bigger, squishier pieces. This was like a tile here in the background where I ran a comb through some underglaze. This is some stamped and stretched piece. And this, I think, is a shell type piece. So again, a real collage with mixed media. That's always fun. I like to use a lot of like leaves and shells and natural textures in the clay. And that's really fun for students of all ages as well. So I think one reason why I'm so drawn to all these natural pieces is I grew up camping. We would go camping, we would walk in the woods. As a little kid, I would sit and play with the pine needles. Then when we moved to the East Coast, I love to collect shells. So we have shells, things from the ocean, driftwood, whoops, okay. So anyway, here's some of the things that I made from the leaf impressions. Students love to make these leaf bowls, particularly when I get really big leaves, very big bowls. Some of the adults have enjoyed making a very big leaf bowl. There's a smaller one that I made. And here's some leaf impressions in some plates. Do we have any questions? No, okay. Let's go back to that one.
No questions yet. Remember, folks, feel free to hit that raise hand button on the bottom of your screen if you guys have any questions.
Yes, or if I'm going too fast or whatever. So the two on the right, obviously those are leaf impressed, but they also have another layer of texture behind them. So I think maybe I skipped something I wanted to show you. Yeah. So this is a texture plate that I carved so that I could make other things out of it. Kind of like a texture mat, but it's a carved piece, and I've had it for a long time. It's held up really well because I threw it on the wheel and then carved it. The only problem is the carving is not deep enough to really get a very strong image each time. But, you know, it's good enough to use occasionally. So I've done that behind these leaves here, at least on this middle one. This texture here was from a rubber placemat. Here's a few more leaf plates and trays and a casserole dish there. And I find for making animals or natural kinds of things, a little black walnut shell I will use to impress in the clay. And that gives a really nice natural look. So that is what this is here. This is a vase. Oh, okay, so I didn't point out that I also grew up sewing. My mother taught me how to sew at a young age. So I love trim and fabric and like to use that also in my process. So here's a nice, whoop, it keeps doing that, there we go. A nice big wide piece of trim that I've used here, some smaller trim here. That's actually like a fabric belt, I think. So that's fun to play with.
Vicky, we do have a couple questions whenever you're ready.
I'm ready.
Sure. Ariel asked, hi Vicky, what tool do you use for carving? And do you use commercial glazes or mix your own?
Okay, I use a lot of AMACO velvet underglazes. I use commercial glazes. The only time I mix is when I buy a dry mix, like of the clear or actually this green that you see here. but I don't create my own glazes. I really don't have a setup for all those chemicals. So I use commercial glazes. And what was the other question?
She was asking, what tool do you use for carving?
Okay. I think I left all my carving tools downstairs. So after the slideshow, I can quickly run down and get that. But they're very, very fine, small carving tools. And also the new tool, let's see, what's that called? The very sharp new tool. I'll have to go get that too. Also, I'm sorry. I should have brought those carving tools up here. But I can get them when we have a minute.
Sure. Thanks, Vicky. We have another question from Judith asking, what process do you use to get different colors for the leaves specifically?
Oh, okay. So those are all underglazes that I layer. What I could do is I put the underglaze on the fresh leaf itself and do that with all the different leaves so I can use different colors, press it into the clay, roll it in, cut out my form, and then I'll take another color, contrasting color, and paint over the whole thing. Okay, and then I can either, like with these two, I can cut out the form here, and then I put it in a shallow plate and kind of bounce it down so it will go down into the plate. And then I can take the leaves off and paint back into the leaves if I want to. And this is all before the bisque firing. So then I can bisque fire them and then go back again. Like this one has a lot of different colors here, and this one has a couple different colors. I can go back in again and add more color, which I do often. Other artists have talked about refiring. I do that sometimes as well till I get something I really like. Okay, so this trim here is the same as this one. Okay, another thing I love to do, and a lot of ceramic people do, is they make their own stamps and sprigs. So I have some that I've carved here. There's a rolling stamp, some other stamps. There's a stamp. Here's a stamp, but I made that a little bit different. I didn't carve that. I pressed that into something, and I can't remember now what I pressed it into. But then I took the coil with the stamp and kind of spiraled it so that I have this kind of circular disc. And that's what I've used to impress here and here. And I'll show you another one and how it can look quite different depending on how you use it. So these sprig molds I've made from buttons. So going back to my sewing days, I've collected buttons. Sometimes I will buy a fancy button, but I use that to impress in the clay as well as make the sprigs. So then when you put the clay in the sprigs, then you have a three-dimensional like button or design that you can add to other things, and I'll show you some examples. Here's a plate where I use that circular disc that I was talking about. It looks very different than those boxes on the surface, just because I pressed into the clay very, very closely in a circular pattern. So it certainly looks different than the surface of the boxes. Okay, so now we're getting to the orchids. So I love to go to the New York Botanical Gardens with my friends, and we've gone for many years, and I take lots and lots and lots of photos. So here's one of the photos I took. I just love the color and the forms and the fact that they can be so varied. So a few years ago, I made what you saw at the very beginning, which I think I can show you. Yes, okay. So I made a couple wall pieces, and I'll show you how I did that. And I also made a couple of bowls by carving a hump mold. Let me just go back for a minute. Oops. Back up. Okay, back to the mood board. So I made a mood board to get some more ideas and to follow through with this one process. a little bit more than what I do in general. So this is the board here. It's fairly big, good size, and set it next to my table as it were. So what I have on it is a lot of pictures that I took, tracings that I made of them, and I have more there. There's some. And then the pieces that I made several years ago from these tracings. Okay, so here's the hump mold that I just carved freehand. I didn't trace onto that. I have it here. So it's an upside down bowl that I threw on the wheel. I think I also threw this ring here. You can see that. Made a lot of holes in it so it wouldn't explode when I fired it. And I carved, like I said, I believe I carved this freehand. And from that, I made these two bowls here. Same thing here. So the tops are hand built, and then I threw pedestals on the wheel, the bottom. Okay, so here's how I made the tracing. This is a current orchid I have. So what I did in the past and recently is just tape the tracing paper to the computer screen and then take the pencil and trace whatever I want. Include what I want, don't include something. So then I'll have my tracings, and then I always make a copy of them, you know, from copy paper, so that I have several of each so that I could use them in different ways. So over here, this is a planter, and I carved into the side of the planter using some of those tracings, as well as tracings of dancers. I don't know if you can see it here. It's the glaze has really run down a lot on that, but they're all the way around are carvings of the orchids and dancers. This one I just freehand carved into a piece that was raku fired. So those are also orchids on that one. Okay, so the reason I will make a copy of the tracing is so I can cut it up. So here I've cut my copy of the tracing into pieces and put it into this bowl that was already bisque fired. So I already put a layer of underglaze on the bowl as it was spinning on the wheel. I love to do that. That's another whole process. But this bowl was bisque fired, and then I took pieces of that tracing, cut it up and arranged it in the bowl, and then glazed it mostly with underglazes. So this is what I was working from, is an orchid with a lot of little dots, if you can see that here. I have more pictures here. Here you can see it a little better. So then it was fired, and this was the result. And sometimes I get a little picky, like I liked everything except I thought the leaves were a little too dark, and this line across the middle was a bit straight. So I wasn't trying to make it look three-dimensional. It looks pretty flat. There's no shadowing. But this piece here, I thought, I want to try to make that a little bit more natural. This one I liked. So I reglazed it and took notes, of course, of what I did. And it came out a little bit better. The green did not show up. The green didn't change, which happens. And I got a little bit of variation right here. So anyway, that's the finished one. So time to make some new things. So I used the older hump mold, which is here that I showed you. And then for the rim of it, I used a plastic plate. So I put the plastic plate on the clay, cut around that, and put that whole thing on the mold, and used a pony roller and really impressed it down in there. And I didn't really like this. I thought it was a little bit too wide and looks like a floppy hat and kind of took away, initially anyway, I thought it took away from the design, the impressed design there. And also I impressed a little too hard, so it cut around the edges, all around here. So I added a coil and then impressed that with some buttons. But I thought, okay, I need to make a my own template, something that I'm going to like better than this. So that's what this is here at the bottom. So this template, paper template, I kind of liked it. It's smaller, a little bit more delicate, a little bit more elegant than that big plastic plate. So cut it out, and like I said, I put it on the mold and used the pony roller. Here's the pony roller. I really impressed down. So I got a lot of those lines, which I thought were okay on the back. Then to let it to set up to dry, I want to put it in this bowl here so it will hold the form. And so I put the sheet here so it wouldn't stick. I turned it over. There we go. Turning it over. And I set it up in this jar so these edges wouldn't get squished. Okay, so there it is. All right, so I wanted to make the pedestal a bit more elegant. So I threw 2 pedestals. I like this one better. And this area here, I used the Steve tool, I think that's what that's called, to get a nice bottom, nice rim here around the foot, And then just as part of playing, I stacked these 2. And of course, that's fun. You can keep stacking and making them different sizes. And so that's an idea for another time. But that's one way you get ideas, is just kind of play around with what you've got at the moment. Okay, so here we are. Again, I used underglazes on these. I bisfired them, used underglazes. And this one I just played around with. It's a tiny little bowl on that other pedestal, and that's a purple glaze, because I haven't found a purple underglaze that I like that will really stay purple. I guess I need to experiment a little bit more. So that is the regular glaze there. And here's the outcome of this one. It's very bright, very energetic. Some people probably don't like all that bright color. But for what it is, I thought it turned out okay. And it actually goes with a lot of other bright colored pieces that I make. I mentioned decorating pieces as they're spinning on the wheel. So for those of you that aren't potters, you can throw a cup, like I threw the cup here. And as it's spinning, I just have all my different underglazes next to me, and I will paint it as the pot is spinning on the wheel. And you get all these wonderful colors and variations. And this pot I thought will go with that series. So that's also kind of what I think about as I'm making things. How will I display them at a craft fair, let's say? So I like all the different colors and styles to go together. And I have so many of them that kind of plan that out in my mind ahead of time. So here's some more of that type of thing where I use the underglazes and glaze them as they're spinning on the wheel. Okay, here's the other one. This I think is much more elegant than the very bright yellow and orange one. And again, this is with my old initial HUMP mold. Now I didn't carve that deep enough either. So I had to go back into this and paint a lot of these areas again. This is electric blue underglaze, AMACO's electric blue, which I use a lot because it's economical and I like the blue and white. This is on that plate that I had showed you earlier. Okay, so now it's time to make a new textured mat, coming into the present here. So,
Vicky, can I interrupt? We have a question from Judy.
Yes.
Judy's asking about what clay body you use and your general firing schedule. I don't know if you can fit that in at any point.
Oh, yes. So it's a standard 181. It's the cone 6 to 10. And I really like it because it fires very white. So with all the little painting that I do on some of those pieces you see there, the background is very white. I find that it dries pretty well also. It dries pretty quickly. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's bad, but overall, I like that clay. I do use porcelain sometimes too, but everything I'm showing you today is pretty much that 181. standard, and you can get it at Clay Art Center. And the firing schedule, I have an old-fashioned Olympic kiln. It's just two rings, so it's not all that big. And I put it on, I have to turn it up, and I use a little junior cone. So every hour I turn it up. I start at 2, then go to 4, then 5, and then high. So I have to be here to turn it up for those 3 hours. Okay, any other questions? Nope. Okay. Okay, so I'm making a new mat. So I took some new pictures and I incorporated all these tracings into the new mat I'm making new pieces from. So I used the rubber tip tool here, put the tracings on the top and made my lines with that rubber tip tool. So this is what I got initially, but I know that that is not clean enough and it's not deep enough to get what I really want from it. So I spent quite a bit of time. Oh, there's one carving tool. That's what I use a lot. It's very thin, so I had to add tape to it. Whoop, well, there you go. It's very thin. I had to add tape to it so I could hold it better, but it has a very small wire on each end. So that's what I use a lot to get the fine lines. So here it is, bisque fired. Now I can start making some new things. All right, so I rolled out the clay onto the mat, and for the most part, yes, I was able to get a lot of raised areas that I like. You can clearly see here, I combined different orchids. There's a bigger one, a lot of small ones. There's a different one over here you can't see as well. Okay, so now I'm starting to make some new pieces. So this is the template that I made before, and these are hump molds I've also made on the wheel, and I've hollowed them out from the inside, and there's no texture on them. They're smooth so that I can make bowls of different depths and different size and so forth. And this is a little poof thing. I think that has rice in it or beans, and I use that to press down gently here so that the form will fit around the mold. And if you're using really big pieces, you might even have to cut a dart out of that. Potters know this. You might have to cut a dart to get it to fit around your mold. But these I didn't have to. Okay, so I made a simple pop-up pedestal for some of the pieces I'm going to show you. I used biscuit cutters, made a little flower, impressed that with the wooden ball into the foam, and we get something like this. So I scored and slipped this. All right, so here is a whole bunch of stuff I was experimenting with using this new texture mat. A whole lot of stuff in my dining room table here. So these are 5 bisque pieces that I came up with. 2 bowls. This is also on a pedestal, hand-built. It's all hand-built here, and a couple of trays. And glazing them. So I had fun with the glazing, kind of put my pictures out here and my orchids out here and the other pieces I made and started glazing. And I used some commercial glaze. I didn't like the way this one turned out as much. I don't even think I took a picture of it, but here we go. So just for those of you that don't know, I know the potters here probably know, I put in a layer. Here, let's see, let's back up just real quick. Okay, so when it's in this state, after it comes out of the bisque firing, I paint the whole thing in blue. So the whole thing is covered in blue. Then I'll take a sponge and wipe all of that down, except for what, let's see, I wiped the top layer down, right? So what you have left is all the blue in the recessed areas. So all of this is the dark blue in the recessed areas. And these lines here, that's what I carved on my texture mat, and that's what I wiped the blue off from. This is why I like the blue and white, because you can clearly see the pattern or your texture by using this technique of wiping it off. And the other reason I use the blue is it's economical, because you do kind of go through a lot of the underglaze that way, but the blue is less expensive than other colors. So then I went back in and painted this. This is violet. This is violet underglaze and a little bit of yellow underglaze and a white dot of, that's a regular glaze there. Then I dipped the whole thing in clear. This is, you'll see the result of this, but this is not underglaze. And this is not underglaze either. Okay, so I like this, but I saw potential for improving. I kind of like the bold colors here, contrast the bold colors. So I see where I could take this a little further. For example, this could have been more bright yellow. I could maybe have yellow on some of the other pieces. And this purple, I was looking at a picture of an orchid with really purple splotches on it. So I was doing a little bit of that here with the purple glaze. I'm not in love with the way it turned out, so when I paint the vase, I think I could alter that a little bit. And this one is a regular glaze. This is called Brilliant Sunburn. It's a Cone 5 commercial glaze. And I kind of like the way the texture, whoops, there we go again. Like the way the texture came out on that, but I'm not real fond of the dots, even though, again, I was working off a picture of an orchid. I think this one might have been better without any of that purple and just been a little bit more elegant, just with the Brilliant Sunburn glaze in the background and the carving in the foreground, or the embossing in the foreground. But live and learn. Okay, here's another one. This is kind of this shallow red dish, maybe, breadsticks. This is a commercial purple glaze. So all of these are made with that same new mold, except for that. That one is not at all. That I just quickly painted. So these are the ones out of my whole orchid process that I like the best. And these are from the new texture mat, from the really old HUMP mold that I carved, and this just painted by hand. So 3 different ways of going about exploring orchids. Oh, okay, so what's next is I started by saying I like to explore all kinds of different things, take many different paths. So one thing I really want to explore a lot more is colored clay, throwing with colored clay. So here's a few examples of what I've started with that. And I also put gold decals. This is a 3rd firing to add the gold decals to these. Pots are thrown on the wheel. A lot of people are masters at using colored clay. Corey Brown, who has been at the Clay Art Center in the past, he is wonderful with this. So I would really like to explore this more. Here's some also experiments with colored clay. You can see how fun this is to layer it, twist it, you kind of stack it, cut it up. So this is really fun. This ended up being a wall piece here. Here's some other experiments I did with colored clay. These are the colored clay pieces here. And there's some fabric texture that I rolled into this hand-built kind of kimono vase. And this is colored clay thrown on the wheel. So another avenue is bubble glazing. So again, I just like to explore all kinds of things. And I think this might be the last slide. Yeah, so what's next for you? You know, wherever your process takes you. Maybe you've gotten some ideas from this. You're welcome to stay for the demo if you would like, or ask questions, comments, and I guess I'll go out of the screen share now.
Yeah, thank you, Vicky. We have a question about bubble glazing. If you could maybe talk a little bit more about explaining that process.
Okay, sure. I could go back to this, I think. Let's see. I think so, yeah. Okay, we'll go back to that. Okay. All right, so bubble glazing. Again, I used the blue underglaze, put it in a glass, put some soap, like some regular dishwashing soap in there, and a straw, and then blow into the straw, and all the bubbles will come out over the glass. So you hold up that glass over whatever surface you are wanting this glaze effect on. So these are all thrown on the wheel. There's a plate. I found that what works best, what gives me the strongest bubble design, is when the bubbles flow out on a flat surface, and you can really control how how the bubbles are kind of flowing out into the plate. It's much harder on a surface like this. So this one I turned upside down, and I guess I added a little bit too much, maybe some water, or my underglaze was a little thin. So you can see how it ran a lot. So I have a lot of drips on that, but that's okay. And this is two different types. I found that the violet underglaze, maybe that was even, I guess that was violet, was not very strong. But anyway, you can play with that and get all sorts of designs. Like once you kind of get familiar with it, you can get some tighter ones, some looser ones, play around with it. I hope that answers your question. And I think there was another question.
Yeah, there is. But staying on the bubble glazing, Ariel's asking, are you diluting the underglaze before mixing it with the dish soap?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, some of my underglazes are diluted already with water. Depends on, yeah. But if it's a really thick, fresh from the jar, then I will add some water and the dish soap.
Sure. Thanks, Vicky. The other question was from Susie Gaines. Susie's asking, Vicky, do you roll the colored clay into pieces before you throw it?
Oh, yeah. Yes. I wish I had some pictures of that. Yes. So I'll take the colored clay, and you only need a little bit. What I did for these, let's see if we can go back to these. I wish I had a better picture of that so you could really see it. But anyway, what I did was I made coils, all different colored coils. Then I interlocked them. I put 3 interlocking different colored coils together. Not this big, but fairly small. So I had, 3 interlocking ones. They were fairly wet when I put them on the side of the pot that was on the wheel that was not thrown, it was only thrown like this much. It's still fairly thick. So I put many of those actually on this one. So they would overlap, and I tried to alternate the colors. And I also put a few on that I believe I stacked and sliced. So that's how you get these. Stack them, roll them up, and then cut in a cross section. So those I put on the side of the pot, as well as those interlocking coil rings I put on the pot. And I found that those little coil rings, actually, this is what I did on this one. They really moved. They moved in the clay as I threw the pot on the wheel. They moved a lot more than these. These didn't move as much. So yeah, this is an example of all those interlocking rings that that moved up the side of the pot as I threw it. So that is something that I really would like to try again. So I made a whole bunch of them at once because it can kind of go pretty fast when you're throwing and you're applying a lot of them on. So I made a whole bunch of them, kept them in plastic, and then used them as I needed them.
Great. And Judith is asking, what are you using to color your clay, Vicky?
Oh, I buy colored porcelain clay. You can buy a whole bunch of them. It comes, I could tell you where I got it from in a minute, or we could put it up on at the end. Or Judith, I could just email it to you. But I buy colored clay already mixed. It's 2 pounds each color. So I haven't mixed my own clay, a colored clay yet. I know you can with mason stains, but I haven't done that. I just find it easier to buy it.
Great. Thank you, Vicky. And Jane Klein's asking about the blue underglaze you were using, and maybe if you could share what blue that was.
Yeah.
That would be great.
Okay. It's AMACO Velvet Underglaze Electric Blue. I have it right here. I can show you. Okay, so these are the underglazes that I use. I know some people have had really good luck with speedball underglazes, but the AMACO Velvets, I find, I really like the color. The bright red is really nice, the bright orange, like all those vibrant colored bowls that I showed you before. Those I use, I paint with the velvet underglazes. I've never had any trouble with them. The only thing, like I said, I can't get a purple that will stay purple in cone 6 firing. It always turns blue.
Great, thanks, Vicky. We have Susie's, I'm gonna put Susie on to ask a question. Susie, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Sure can.
Yes, yes.
Okay, Vicky, what I was just saying is I use mason stains to color my white clay and then layer it before I throw it. I think it would be fun to try your system though.
Yeah, okay, all right. I know I need to learn more about, you know, the mason stains. Maybe that could be something for Hudson River Potters sometime.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Great, thanks, Susie. Okay. All right, Vicky. I think we were going to head over to the demo.
Okay. So let's stop the share and okay, good. So, like I said, I really like the potential of this. So I want to do this again, but on a larger surface. So last night I made a vase. I'll show you. Let's see if I can move my computer over here. All right. Okay, so this is the vase I made last night. It's just 2 slabs pressed into the mold, or not the mold, the texture mat that I carved. So I'll show you what happened to it as I used it. But anyway, this gives me a lot of potential for playing with those colors. So I'll demo how to put one of these together. I just want to show you though what happened to my mat. It completely cracked apart into 3 sections. So I had to use epoxy and put it back together. And so far it's lasted, but I think what I'll do if I want to pursue the orchid design even more is throw one on the wheel. It's much more sturdy, heavy. You can see the difference. This was a little bit warped, so when I put pressure on it, it cracked. This I've had forever, and it's fine. So I think I need to throw one of these on the wheel and then carve it. Okay, so I have immediately and not stand upright because it plays too soft. So this one I not working. Can you hear me, everybody?
Yeah, we're getting some feedback and breaking up a little bit here, Vicky.
Oh.
Wait, that might be better.
Okay.
Okay, I think we're good.
Okay. All right. So I was just saying that rolling out slabs now will not hold its shape. Potters know this, will not hold its shape. So I roll it out and let it step a little bit on a big roll. Okay. So this one I'm going to do Okay, so I rolled a slab on this. I'll take it off. It's what I'm doing. Try this. But I know what's going to be bigger because the edge of this.
Hey, Vicky, can you hear me?
Yeah.
We're getting some feedback here. I don't think have a good audio connection. I wonder
Okay.
if you could maybe try hitting your mute button, muting and unmuting. I don't know if that would be enough to reset it, but it seems to be an issue.
Yeah. Okay. I know it says my speaker's not working, but
That sounds fine right there.
oh, it's good now. Okay.
All right.
All right.
I'll just keep an eye on it.
Okay. We just have a few minutes left anyway, right? About 7 minutes. Okay. Let's see if you can see anything here. I mean, the potters know how to do this. Okay. So this will probably make some noise. Vicky. Hope that's not too noisy. Okay, so I'm going to flip it over, take it off. Okay. So, all right. So it took some, this is upside down. At the bottom, I didn't really roll it enough. I mean, that's okay for now, but it's better to have, you know, the deeper impressions. But anyway, I have a simple template here that I made, and I will cut the top. And I use an X-Acto knife. I don't know, can you see that? Can you see anything, James?
We can, Vicky. I would tilt your screen down towards the clay a little bit more if you could.
Is that better?
That is better.
Okay, okay, good. Okay, I'm gonna go pretty quickly because we only have a few minutes. Use a ruler. I don't really need this anymore. Okay, so what we want to do is cut at an angle so that the sides will fit together better. Our friend Logan is a master at putting the seams together. I'm always in awe at how seamless her seams are. But anyway, so I uncut here, hold my same position. So I'm cutting at an angle. It's beveling the edge. The bottom is just going to be straight, a straight cut. Okay, I can save these pieces because we'll need a little coil for the seams on the inside. And I have a chamois here. What you want to do is always smooth and compress your edges saves time to do it now, but also when you stand it up and you curve it, it could crack at the top. So it's better to all press those edges. Okay, so now this is probably not going to hold its shape. In fact, the clay is really too wet. What I did last night to make the one that you saw was I let it set up like this, and then I used a hair dryer on one half to get it to dry. Okay. So what you would do, well, I should put it this way so that you can see. We're going to score and slip this edge. So the potters and the hand builders know how to do this. I have my slip and my tool. So I don't think we have to go through this thing, but I would put a lot of slip here, use the scoring tool, score this up really, really well. Do the same thing here. And hopefully my angles would match up pretty well. Yep, I think so. So see, the other one isn't. That's because it needs some time to dry. But anyway, I would score and slip and really work on these seams, which is what I did with the other one. Then once you can hold it, you pick it up and you put it on a piece of clay and trace around your bottom form, and then score and slip the bottom on. Here. So I would just cut around it. Sometimes I have a template, but it never quite matches up. I like to just cut directly on the clay.
Say that again, Vicky?
Oh, I just wondered if you had asked me something.
Nope, I think we just got a little more feedback there.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, anyway, so this vase is pretty simple. But I think it has some potential. You know, I like the kind of the flowing lines across the rim. Here's the bottom. And you just have to compress all the seams really, really well. So I spent some time working on the seams for this one. And I actually did get some of those lines in here from the cracks in the mold. So it's time to make a new mold. But I do see some potential in painting this with those underglazes and getting some nice contrast. Okay. Any other questions? I think it's about time.
Okay, thank you so much, Vicky. That was a real treat. Thank you for bringing us into your studio and your process. Thanks everybody for coming. Very appreciate it. Thanks again, Vicky. If anybody wants to see your work online or find out more about yourself or your work, where can they find you, Vicky?
Well, I was looking for my official address here. Etsy. I have an Etsy shop. It's brand new though. There's only 13 pieces on there. I have a lot of pieces on Instagram. So if you just go to Vicky Youngman, you'll find me on Instagram. And that's what they are.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. And thanks again, everybody. Have a nice day.
You too. Bye-bye.